Welcome to the Life Is podcast, where creativity, culture, mindset, and intentional living come together through real conversation. I'm your host, Corey Brown. Each week, I sit down with entrepreneurs, artists, athletes, travelers, and visionaries who didn't stumble into a life they love, they built it. We go deep into how they think, how they reconstructed themselves, and what became possible on the other side. This is not just about what people have accomplished. It's about the internal work that made it sustainable. Because when you build from the inside out, life expands. Let's get into it. This week, I'm sitting down with someone who walked away from an engineering degree, not because he failed, but because he was self-aware enough to know it wasn't his life. Robert Liberatore packed a bag with $4,500, backpacked through Peru, Hawaii, Japan, Indonesia, Singapore, London, and Italy, and came home a filmmaker. Not by accident, by decision. He has spent the years since building a creative career on his own terms. Brand shots, fashion, travel, hospitality, and now documentary filmmaking that is taking him back to the exact places where this whole journey started. His story is not about finding the perfect path. It's about having the courage to leave a path that did not belong to you and building something that does. Here's what that looked like from the inside. Well, good afternoon there, Robert. I appreciate you coming on. It's good to see you. Good to have you on the show, on the Life Is podcast, obviously hosted by myself. But, before we kind of get going, before titles, cameras, travel, how are you feeling today?
Good, man. I'm excited. I appreciate you having me on. It's fun to sit down and chat through some of this stuff, and yeah, I'm looking forward to it. But life's good right now. Especially today. It's 69 and sunny
Yeah.
in New York, it's new territory for us this year at least. So I'm excited, man. It's been good. Yeah, I've got some fun projects I've been working on, and feeling very fortunate. But
Mhm.
got good friends around me. Got a good relationship with my wife, although she's out of town right now, living her best life and leading retreats in El Salvador, which is cool to watch from afar. So things are good, man. How about things with you?
I love it, man. Sounds like life is good. Yeah, things are good. Of course, we're in Indiana, right? I know you said New York. It's 70 degrees here. So, like yourself, I'm enjoying the weather. I know it'll probably change by tomorrow, but I'm gonna soak it in today and enjoy it. But no, life is good. Kids are good. Just building a lot of momentum, right? Obviously, we have a Life Is podcast, but just in general, life has been building. It's been compounding
Love
overall.
love
So it's
that,
been
man. Love
good,
to
man.
hear that.
Appreciate you asking. Um, Before we get going, kind of settle in, right? And kind of make things smooth here. For all the listeners that are listening, can you kind of tell everyone, just kind of, uh, like I said, get going, kind of tell where you're from, what you're currently doing, and what kind of led you or what has led you to this point currently?
Sure. So I grew up in North Carolina. I was born in upstate New York, Syracuse, like upstate, as they say in the city. But I grew up in North Carolina, lifelong athlete. So I ended up playing college soccer at a school in Philly called Drexel. Studied engineering, kind of left that world behind and decided to pursue a career in photography and videography. And, been freelancing on and off for the past 9, 10 years now at this point. I guess 2016, 2026, 2016. So
Yes,
yeah,
sir.
about 9, 10 years. And, I've worked in house for a few brands as well as like their director of content strategy or creative director and things of that nature. But yeah, just kind of been living life behind the lens for better part of 10 years and seeing what adventures those have led me to. And ultimately they kind of brought me to New York.
Awesome, man. I love it. Yeah, I appreciate the background for the listeners there, kind of set the stage here. And as we move forward, man, when someone meets you today, right? They see filmmaker, and we're gonna get into this later, right? Filmmaker, creative, traveler, model, right? Good looking guy. And but what do you feel, or I guess who do you feel like you're in who you are today in this season of your life?
It's an interesting question. All of those things that you said are certainly part of my makeup, my DNA. It's interesting here, traveler, and I feel like in many ways my travel has slowed down quite a bit from the backpacking days and the wild adventures, but there's still plenty of those fun trips in the cards, especially with as much location shooting as I do and some of the documentaries I get to work on. It's still a big component of my life, which is fun. I think it
Mm-hmm.
helps paint a colorful life, and you get to view the world in a different lens, which is fun. But yeah, right now, I think to answer your question, I feel like I'm in this period of growth. It's interesting, I feel like freelancing, especially, you sort of have these waves throughout your career, and right now it sort of
Mm-hmm.
feels like there's a lot being worked on behind the scenes, and a lot that's kind of boiling up to fruition in the next couple months. So very excited about all of that. Certainly nerve wracking at times, which is, I think, in my experience, some of the best aspects of life are the ones that sort of test your nerves a little bit and push you a little outside the comfort zone. So it's exciting to sort of see and be aware of the fact that, okay, there's these projects that are sort of potentially shaping my future for the next couple of years. And I think it's probably one of the first times
Hmm.
in my career really where I'm sort of aware of like the stage of
Sure.
growth that I'm in. Usually that's more of a behind this, not behind the scenes, but that's more of a looking back kind of 2020 vision type situation. You can see the growth happening, but this is probably the first time in my life I'm kind of consciously aware of the growth phase that I'm in while I'm in it. Obviously, I
Yeah.
don't know how big of a growth phase it will or won't be, what it will or won't lead to, but it's really exciting for those reasons. And obviously, yeah, there's a couple nerves around it. So trying to balance it all out and enjoy the ride.
Yeah, man. No, it sounds like it. That's like I said, as you were speaking, that's what I was getting at. That's what I was picking up as well. It's like there's an awareness of seeing the shift, right? You're seeing the tides kind of turn slowly, from what it sounds like behind the scenes, what you're building, what you're wanting to take care of, and ultimately, accomplish professionally, from what you're accomplishing and striving for. So no, that sounds good. When you kind of look at life now, I guess, what does a fulfilling life look like to you right now? Maybe not professionally, but just personally for yourself.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's like the $1,000,000 question for everyone, right? Is like what at the end of the day is
Yeah.
what's gonna like light them up. And I think that for me changes throughout the years, which I think is okay. But I think at the core of who I am, especially being like a lifelong athlete, I love to compete, right? And part of that is like applying yourself to the fullest. And I think the older I get and the more I mature, the more I'm realizing that it's less and less about, the competition and more about just placing myself in an environment that requires me to apply myself to the fullest. And I'm certainly someone that loves an experience that sort of empties the tank, if you will.
Mhm.
That can be a physical thing, that can be a mental thing. I was just in Palm Springs shooting this tennis and pickleball tournament for a supplement
Yeah.
brand called IM8. And it was long days. It was 18-hour days back to back to back, with some editing on top of all of that in between. And those test you mentally, they test you physically, but those are the types of environments that I really enjoy the most, I think. So for me, a fulfilling life definitely looks like putting myself in environments, whether it's socially, professionally, personally, whatever it may be, where I am presented with opportunities that really allow myself to apply myself as fully as I can. And that can be obviously, like I said, behind the camera, behind the lens, directing whatever shoot I'm on. That can be, on a snowboarding trip or a climbing trip, just giving it my all and coming back and feeling like I'm fully spent. And that could just be socially, just hanging out with someone or a group of friends or my wife in an environment where we get to really fully immerse ourselves in the conversations we're in. So I think at the end of the day, it's just, making sure that we're working towards things that really give us satisfaction, make us proud in terms of the types of work we're doing, and just allow us to, like I said, give it our all and give our full undivided attention and energy.
Yeah. I love that you said applied, because it sounds like that there's some competition with yourself. Like, I'm going to apply myself in a situation fully, and then I don't know, maybe get some type of information or data points of like how far can I go, like how much can I push myself, but also um, leaning into those activities that are going to require the energy and the time and the focus to do that. So that was awesome. And two, just knowing that the pole can move. Like, that was the first thing you said, is that, I think it does change. I don't think, when you say what's a fulfilling life, it has to be like a definite of like, this is it. I think there is some fluidity in your, in what we can answer and what we're looking for and what feels fulfilling for us. And that's encouraging, I think, for listeners, for myself as well, knowing you that hey, we can have a um kind of a binary answer, if you will, or reasoning to finding a fulfilling life. So yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I think this happens more so in like the outdoor world, like climbing and things like that. But there's also this concept of like earning your sleep, so to speak.
Yeah, yeah,
Right?
yeah.
I think you can earn your sleep many different ways throughout the day, and like that can be a professional thing, that can be a social thing, but I think as long as I'm stacking as many days as possible where I'm earning my sleep, it's a good life for me.
Yeah. No, I can tell when you said applied, it was like you like to
Yeah,
get in it, right? Like
yeah.
I could see the body language change of like, okay, I'm gonna get in this and I'm gonna kill it.
Yeah.
So I love it, man. I love to kind of rewind a little bit, right? The clock a little, and because your story obviously isn't linear, which is awesome. I do love your story. I think a lot of people are gonna appreciate the journey you've gone through, and that's what makes it powerful. So you mentioned you went to Drexel, right? You did your engineering program while also playing sports. I don't think you mentioned, but for those who are listening, you played soccer, which obviously any division at any level, I feel like in collegiate sports is demanding, right? No matter what you're doing while doing school and achieving, goals. What originally drew you toward engineering while kind of balancing school and a, demanding, field of work?
It's a good question. I think for me, it's like, to be truthfully honest, there isn't like a huge draw to engineering per se, outside of the fact that I'm someone that likes to be challenged, right?
Hmm.
As you mentioned, like played soccer at a very high level growing up, always went to nationals and things like that. But I also like treated school and education as a bit of a game as well. And I like to
Like,
win, right? So
yeah, yeah,
in some ways, I was very much like a nerd as well. And that's okay. I had really good grades coming out of high school, and so all the schools I was looking at potentially playing at were also like good academic schools, and there was a wide gamut. There wasn't like a, oh, I know I want to be an engineer, or, oh, I know I want to go into finance or whatever it was. But basically, any school that I looked at, I was like, what's like the most difficult program they have, right? So there was I
to the
almost went to
top.
Princeton, and I was like looking at neuroscience and things like that. But
Hey, awesome.
ultimately, like Drexel was like the best fit for me from a athletic
Yeah,
and financial standpoint, and also academic. And so Drexel has a really good engineering program, and they also have a really cool co-op program where you get to go to school for 6 months, but then actually work entry level, real life work positions for 6 months, and you kind of alternate on that. And as a result, like I said, engineering seemed like the most difficult program there, and I was good at math, and I liked it. And yeah, for me, it really just came down to the fact like, okay, this could be a cool challenge. This could be a career path that sets you up on like a
yeah.
good trajectory. And so I wanted to give it my best and give it a shot.
Yeah, that's funny, man. You're like, "Look, let me go to the hardest program you got. Let me go
Yeah,
for it and see what see what I can do."
yeah.
That's interesting. Most people, they wouldn't, choose the hardest program they got and try to go for it. But once
Yeah,
again,
there's parts of me, I mean, I really wish I had like a something I was like passionately interested in coming out of high school that I could have just been like, "Oh, I know I wanna do this." Like, I'm so envious of the kids, especially in like the filmmaking world. They're like, "Oh no, I've had a camera in my hand my whole life." I'm like, "That's so cool." Like, I did not have that. But yeah, it was just like it was a fun challenge at the end of the day. And, I also liked physics and things like that. So I was like, "Oh, this could be
yeah,
really cool."
it's a good challenge. I think from that, there's an emergent, I don't know, school skills, tools, things you learn from that, right? Like you're going off the hardest thing, you're challenging yourself. And because of that, I think there's a natural budding process that unravels of what other things you enjoy or other likes and dislikes. So yeah, I agree. I think it's a great, obviously, choice. And speaking of physics, I've been kind of getting into myself.
Okay.
It's funny. I got some new books I ordered kind of offline here, right? Some physics books. Mm, I've gone from metaphor, kind of poetry, which is great, right? There's all these philosophies and different sciences of what we have, but physics is like constrained, right? Here's the constraints. Here's the question. How's our data? What's the experiments? Is it falsifiable? So it kind of helps me, even on this podcast, keep me kind of honed in of like, what's the reality? What do we have actual data from? Um, but I'm loving it, man. I'm loving the new way of thinking. It's giving a new perspective when you
Yeah,
look at physics.
for
And
sure.
yeah,
There's some fascinating elements to it. And like, at the end of the day, you're studying how the world works, which
yes,
can never be a bad thing to understand more about. There are there are limitations within that, obviously, too. But yeah, like we funny enough, on this shoot in Palm Springs, we were interviewing some of the professional tennis players, and one of them's like just like 24-year-old kid that's just like obsessed with quantum physics, apparently. So he was just like nerding out on that, which is
yeah,
cool.
yeah,
It's a fun world to look to learn about. At least glimpse into.
yeah. No, I don't want to. I agree. I don't want to get off too much line because I could talk
Yeah.
about this. Well, it's I eat it up. It's stuff I do out
Yeah, yeah.
in my free time. But speaking of Drexel, right? So you obviously went there engineering, right? And um, if you want to elaborate a little bit, sounds like saying things shifted, right? At one point, maybe did you think engineering may not be your long time like calling once you kind of got into it?
Yeah, so as I mentioned, Drexel has this co-op program, which is, I can't say enough good things about it. For most people, they come out of school with a full year and a half of like real life applied work experience, and they come out of school with a job, which is amazing.
Yeah,
I
it's
was
fun.
like one of like the 3% of Drexel students that didn't come out of school with a job because I knew, oh, I'm not going to be an engineer, right? Um, yeah, basically you have those 6 month stints, and about 2 weeks into my second 6 month working cycle, I was like, oh boy, like this is not how I want to live the next 40, 50 years of my life.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah,
I just sort of realized like, oh, like even though I like the school, I like the education, I like the classes, I've got a 3.9 GPA, like I on paper, like this is for me. The real
hmm,
world was so different, and that's okay. But I find it equally, if not more valuable, that I found out exactly what I didn't want to do.
correct.
But it was it was a little nerve-wracking, if I'm being completely honest, about like, yeah, knowing what you don't wanna do is super important, but, like, it doesn't give you any answers about what you do wanna do necessarily, so that was certainly an interesting period of self-discovery, I guess, is what you would say. But, yeah, about 2 weeks into my second co-op cycle, I was like, "Guess I'm not gonna be an engineer for the rest of my life."
Yeah, yeah, that's pretty soon. And and speaking of obviously school, obviously you find out like, hey, this is not what I want to do. Now you're left here like, okay, now what? Right? It's not really no answer. It's just that I know I don't want to go that direction. You balance school, right? Athletics, co-ops. How did that season, excuse me, shape your discipline and work ethic that you still carry today?
Yeah, I mean, I think as you know, like, playing a sport while also
Right.
trying to balance an education is, like, it's a full-time job, 30 hours a week. So I
Yep.
think in many ways that whole period, like, especially being in engineering, um, it really just taught me how to kind of maximize my time and like
Right.
really, efficiently get jobs done when it has to be done in a certain time frame. It's kind of funny. Like sometimes the more time I had, and this still holds up true, like the less efficient I am with things.
Yeah.
When
Yeah.
crunch
Yeah.
when crunch time rolls around, like
Yeah.
I am the guy for the job. Like I
Right.
am someone that can absolutely crank, and just like get it done because I know what it's like to have to get it done in, an hour and a half or whatever it may be. And I think it also just taught me how to do the work when I didn't necessarily want to do the work. Right. And I think
Yeah,
that
that's
that's something that's not always easy to pick up. And then at the end of the day, too, like an engineering degree, especially, like you do have to teach yourself or learn how to learn. Right. And I think that that's a skill that has carried over with me for the rest of my life, especially looking at photography, videography. In many ways, I'm self taught. I put an asterisk on that because no one's self taught these days. Like you're getting information from something, but self guided, I guess you would say. Right.
not formally
And
taught.
that
Yeah.
that comes from the ability to learn how to study this complex type of material on your own, right? Because
Yeah.
your professors only take you so far in a program like that. So, yeah, it's like it's really just that I'm so grateful for that period of my life where, I was balancing, 3 or 4 different things at a time and being forced to learn how to juggle those in a way where you're still productive in all of those arenas and you're able to grind through the difficult parts so you can enjoy the really, really
The good
special
part.
highs, like, it's the best.
Yeah, no, no kidding, man. I always joke and tell people, man, college football, for those who listen, I played football in college and at Bowling Green, and there's no off season. Like off season was probably worse than in season.
Off season's awful, dude.
Yeah, off season is worse. Like all this time
Yeah, man.
and the trainers just make up stuff. So it's like you really have to balance. Yeah, like I said, school, workouts, making sure you're on time, and you're right, man. Those low moments teach you to appreciate the good moments when you are in
Yeah,
that low period of the season or just in the school year it's helpful. So it's definitely transcends and helps you, as a young adult.
absolutely. I mean, I think it also teaches you how to enjoy the low moments, which I think is, like, a very beneficial part of life as well, because life isn't all high moments as much as we
Nope.
would love that, right?
No. Yep.
But yeah, funnily enough, with the weather out right now, and I think I've told you I'm training for this like wild endurance project called the Speed Project. It's just like a long, long run from Los
Yeah.
Angeles to Las Vegas with some people, but trying to get back into shape. And I dug deep into like the college soccer archives today and did my 10:30 sprint workouts in like a
Oh man.
sun, and
Okay.
it's just like doing those, it's like, okay, I know that that's always there, right? And I know I can always dig deep enough to get back to where we need to be. So, yeah,
I
at the
love
end of the
that,
day,
man.
it's
Good
just
for you.
that whole process is like it's so valuable. You get to take it with you the whole time, whole life. So
You're
yeah.
jumping back in crazy stuff, man.
I know there was some PTSD in those
Obviously in LA to
sprints
like
today.
LA to maybe a city down south of LA, but you said Las Vegas. That's a run.
Yeah, yeah, we'll see how it goes. We'll we'll have some follow-up
But
on
we'll
that.
keep us posted.
Yeah.
So you were at Drexel. I know as you're like, hey, I don't know what I want to do, or this is what I don't want to do, right? You started to dabble a little bit into photography and exploring some modeling. What was happening like in that time period, maybe internally, that made creativity start pulling at you? Or what maybe pulled that towards your atmosphere?
I think it's a great question. I think, it's interesting, like so I was on an accelerated master's program at
Hmm.
Drexel as well, and so when I realized, "Oh, I'm not gonna be an engineer," like, my
Right.
first thought was like, "Well, I'm definitely not gonna, like, kill myself in the classroom and take all these extra classes," right? So I
Yeah.
dropped the master's program pretty much immediately, and, yeah, obviously, that also happened to coincide with the fact that Drexel's like a 4-year school that takes 5 years because you have this extra year and a half of work experience,
Right.
and as someone who didn't redshirt playing soccer, like I played my first 4 years, like I had a full year, year and a half of like normal student life, which was uh, quite the experience, and most athletes don't get to experience that. And I'm very fortunate I did, but I was also pretty bored during that time frame because
Yeah.
you
So you're so
drop
used to
like,
be busy.
yeah, you drop like 30 hours a week from the sport. You drop all the extra classwork. I was basically done with my curriculum that final year. So I was just trying to like figure out what to do and also understand like, okay, well, like if I don't want to be an engineer, I should start
Mhm.
experimenting with some of the things that maybe I think could work instead. And I think that like from that boredom, like, I was willing to take on like random classes, like even if I knew they weren't really going to be my career per se, like maybe they'll lead to something. So I was taking like a couple random dance classes as electives just
Oh
because I
shit.
thought it'd be fun or I might be able to learn
Yeah.
something or whatever it was. And then through that, I actually got connected with someone who's in the fashion design program and they had like a senior design project where they needed models. So I got pulled into that, and from there, ended up in some photo shoots or ended up in a runway at the end of the year and was enjoying it and having fun. And, I think there was part of me that thought like, oh, this is, just that. It's just fun. But I think there was also part of me that was starting to see other people that were making like divergent choices. And, I had a buddy in an engineering program who's now a really talented, established commercial and editorial photographer named Tayo Cuckoo. Look him up, beautiful work. But he, was kind of going through some of the same questions. And he started portrait photography at the time. So, I shot with him a little bit. And the more and more I was just willing to be curious and try things without necessarily being attached to like what the outcome
Output.
whether it wouldn't
Yeah.
be. I had started realizing like how much I was enjoying this sort of creative side of myself that I didn't really know existed beforehand, and I think very fortunately, like it coincided with a period of technology where tech had finally caught up to creativity and was sort of producing tools at a mass scale where you could pick up a camera that wasn't too expensive and you could learn it on YouTube
Yep.
and then you could go apply it, in certain ways and then use a platform like Instagram to sort of test things out. And at that point, it became very formulaic. And I never really viewed creativity as formulaic thing. I sort of grew at this like awe-inspiring, like these people
Yeah.
are different, right?
Right.
So I
Right.
think I think kind of that perfect storm and that curiosity and willingness to just try things really helped me out and ultimately kind of shaped the foundation of where we are today.
Yeah. Yeah. Definitely sounds like the curiosity was huge, right? Just learning, being open to something new, and not like you said, having an expectation on the outcome, which is yeah, you can have some fun. There's some leeway in there. You know, I'm joking in my head too. I'm sure when you got to dance class that your footwork was pretty good. Being in soccer, I'm sure that was I would say probably easier transition than most.
I mean, I can't speak for anybody else, but there were some good moments and there were some rough moments, but that was all part of the process. But I think
Right.
ultimately it kind of circles back to what I was saying earlier too, where like I'm someone that gets the most out of situations where I'm fully applying myself. And I think that putting myself in some of those rather different fields, right, and
Mhm.
rather different situations, like, if I wanted to keep up, like, I
Yeah.
did have to apply myself a bit, and it was in a different way, and then so I think that's also part of the reason, like, that creative side was rewarding in some ways because it really did take my full attention. So I
Yeah.
think that did help continue to encourage me to do more of it because I was getting the satisfaction of, like, trying hard out of it.
Yeah. And you learn too. Like I said, I think I was talking to someone the other day. There's a valuable lesson in I wouldn't say failing, but doing things to your point, creativity or um I don't know, my mind goes right to, like, getting data points, like, getting intel of, like, "Oh, this is what worked, this is what didn't work." 'Cause I think so many of us wanna know and be in the right and have the right knowledge and not look dumb, but, like, we should flip it on its head and, like, the stuff I don't know, that gives me the guardrails of, like, "Oh, okay, this is what didn't work. Let me keep going." Right?
Yeah.
Let me keep this kinda Thomas Edison idea of, like, I didn't fail, I just kept on learning 1,000 different ways. So I think there's some validity in that as well. But leading also to my next question as you were speaking, what fears or maybe doubts that you could have had or even showed up when you first allow yourself to, imagine a different path as you're kind of like, I think, sprouting this new maybe field or adventure away from, like you said, the engineering and obviously post soccer.
There were quite a few doubts and fears, I joke around and say I had all of them, but, like I said before, I had one really solid concrete answer, which was really valuable, but,
Yeah,
knowing what you don't wanna do is very different than knowing what you wanna do, and I really hadn't considered other alternatives besides engineering, once I committed to that path because I sort of thought we'd figured it out, and
correct.
so once that paradigm got completely flipped upside down, it was a very, like, I don't know, like, interesting time in terms of, like, just figuring it out and kind of looking at some of those doubts and even wondering if I was gonna be able to figure out what I wanted to do, or if I was
Yeah,
just gonna end up taking a job I hated still, but deep down knowing that I hated it, right? Like, that was terrifying as well. But I think ultimately, like, it came down to, just being willing to, again, put myself in a situation where I wasn't necessarily comfortable with it, or I didn't necessarily expect that that was where we were gonna go, but, like, I worked a bunch of random odd jobs and, did some landscaping, worked behind the bar, did some consulting, things
mhm,
like that, and, again, not necessarily being attached to what the final outcome will or won't be, but knowing that this is something we're gonna try right here, right now, and it's gonna serve a purpose, whether that purpose goes beyond today or tomorrow or the next 5 weeks, doesn't matter, and I think that ultimately, like, that like, really helped out, and then I during that kinda period of doubt, I also went and traveled, right? And that's where that kind of, like, that phase of travel really comes into play where my now wife and I, but at the time, girlfriend, ended up backpacking around the world for 4.5 months with no set itinerary, and there were a couple things we had scheduled, but, that was really, like, a huge period of self-discovery and kind of, like, allowing answers to come to me even though I didn't really see how they were gonna come, and um, yeah, I think just, like, bit by bit started to realize, okay, more and more is possible, like, and believing, okay, I am gonna figure this out, or, okay, if I'm trying something and I don't like it, it's at least checking something off the list that gets me closer and closer to, like, finding out what the final answer is, and I think that that was hard to see at first, but kinda the more I did it, the more I started to realize what the
yeah.
process was looking like.
Yeah, it's always hard in the moment. I think, from what it sounds like, you always kinda kept the possibility there, like a mindset of what's possible or keeping this positive perspective, if I'm assuming is like, "Hey, there is something out there. There's something I can find." Um, whether that's, you're still gonna have fears like, "What am I gonna do? Am I gonna fail? Am I gonna make it? What do I wanna" at a young age too, it feels heavy, I think, most kids that age, even young adults, we're all told to go to college and then get a job, and it's like, okay, if I don't have that plan, like you said, then it's like, well, oh shit, I don't know what to do. You know,
Yeah, yeah.
I'm kinda lost. I'm like, now I gotta scramble, but it sounds like it was you always kept possibility in front of you of,
Yeah,
ha
I think that's one way to look at it. I think, it was also interesting too because, like, I did it, right? Like, I did
yeah,
the formula you just described, right? Go to school, get good grades, get a good job. Like, I had a 3.99 GPA at one point. Like,
see,
I was doing this stuff, and I was like, "Wait a minute, I don't want the final answer here, like, so what do I do?"
yeah,
And yeah, I think part of it was, like, believing that there was a possibility. I think part of it was also just sort of knowing, and I think this might come back to what we talked about earlier with, like, college soccer and engineering and that sort of,
mhm,
like, intense phase told me to, like, figure out how to work through, like, the difficult parts and, like, enjoy the lows. Like, at the end of the day, I sort of made sure that I was still, like, taking action and moving through the fear, right? Like, knowing that fear is there is
yeah,
fine, but, like, we have to ultimately still move through that and be able to take action while that is there, because otherwise, like, you get sort of this analysis paralysis and, like, freeze up mode. And I think that was really the big thing was just like, okay, like, we're gonna take a step. Even if we don't believe today that there's like a rainbow at the end, right? Or a pot of gold at the end of the rainbow, like, we're gonna take one step today. And I think that some days that was easier to do than others, but luckily we took enough steps and found something that worked.
you actually I think you probably already answered my next question. I was gonna ask you, what advice, would you give someone who's successful on paper? Like you said, you had a 3.9 GPA, you were doing the things, right? Like, you were doing it all. But someone who is successful on paper, but may feel, quietly feel misaligned. But it sounds like if I maybe answer for you, it sounds like you said, take a step each day.
Yeah, I mean, I think, that's certainly part of it, is like I said, one step at a time, like, it's a huge aspect of it, but, I think, like, I would say that, like, the true judge of success, like, comes from within, right? Like, ultimately,
Mhm.
it doesn't matter if someone to use me as an example, right? If someone sees my GPA and sees, like, what I'm doing with soccer in college or whatever it may be, like, and that might look successful, but at the end of the day, if I know this is not what I wanna do,
Mhm.
then none of that really matters, at least in my eyes, right? So I think that understanding that we get to control what success does and doesn't look like to us is super important. I think nowadays there's like a really big, and I think some of this has calmed down a bit, but in the past decade, especially, there's like this notion that we have to like chase our passions and like that's like how we kind of fuel our work and everything.
Mhm.
And I think it's very important to be passionate about work, but I think I don't love the idea to like only chase your passions because, as I mentioned, like what
Yeah.
you're interested in can change on a daily basis. So to kind of try to build a career around what you're passionate about may or may not be a good idea for people. For some, it will. For some, it won't. I think the bigger thing again kind of boils down to that concept of application, right, and self application of like finding the type of work where you feel comfortable and excited to apply yourself every day,
Yes.
right? To me, that's like the definition of success because you know, at the end of the day, like if we're just working just to work, like it's brutal. And
Yeah.
that's not a way to
Yeah,
live
that's not a
life
life you wanna,
to
yeah.
me, you know?
Yeah.
Uh, and like we only have a finite amount of time on this planet. And I think like the environment really shapes and allows you to like test yourself in a way that's fulfilling. So if you can find the type of work where, as I mentioned in Palm Springs, like we had 18-hour days, we were editing at night, and then we were waking up and doing it all
Mhm.
over again. And like that was a blast though, because like that was an arena, that was like a environment where it was so fun to like just give it our all. Right. And for some people, it's about giving it your all. It's not necessarily um that for everyone, right? So I think whatever applying yourself means, I think if you can find the type of work where you get to do that and you get to like really lean into it, then I think the success is there and the success comes and that's in like a much easier way to measure it than just like an arbitrary, oh, well, I'm doing what I love. Well, because
Exactly.
I think you can develop passion around any type of work, but um, what you don't want you to do is you don't want your work in any aspect of your life to kind of dwindle and like uh, put the you don't want it to dwindle the passion that you have for any aspect of your life, if that makes sense.
No, it does. Man, I love that answer. That's so true. I'd be inclined to agree to what you're saying.
I also think I will say one other thing too. Like I think success goes beyond just like the arena of work, right? There's so many different like aspects of life, and I think
Mhm.
for some people, like you can find more or less success in your work than you can in like the things you do outside of work. And um, yeah,
Yeah.
I
I
think
would
if
I
you
would
can
even
find the
add
balance, it's amazing.
to your point, I think it's you said something like it's giving down. I think people are more people are realizing that. I don't know if it's a turn in, I don't know, collective, consciousness or something, but, yeah, I feel like people are realizing, like, to your point, exactly what you said is that people are finding success, happiness, and other things just in work. Your passion can change. Um, Beliefs change, right? Perspectives change. So, no, I totally agree with what you're saying, about that. As we move forward, because you spoke about, backpacking too. So, obviously, you graduate from Drexel, and then you obviously take a step, I would say, that most people would be afraid of, right? Which we're gonna get into. You talk about backpacking, and I believe that we spoke offline. You said you took roughly $4,500, which is absurd nowadays.
Yeah, yeah, no way.
Traveled the world for 5 months, which is wild. I just seen a video, I don't know, I think a family that traveled around for, like, 12 months, and it was, like, 30-something thousand dollars a
Yeah,
year,
yeah.
which is wild, right? And some of these countries are, like, um, beneficial from a monetary standpoint, but in any case, obviously that takes courage and trust, right? When you're doing that at a young age. What made you say yes, right, to that leap after college and not kind of go down the traditional path?
Well, I mean, I think it was less about saying like yes to that and more
Yeah,
about saying no to everything else that was in front of me. So I was kind of this perfect combination of okay, I have absolutely no answers back home about what I want to do. I
yeah,
have job offers in front of me that are like hard no's for me right now. And so it's like, well, what else is there? Right. And I was
yeah, yeah.
seeing all of these like incredible photographers on Instagram and Twitter at the time that were sort of getting some of the answers that I wanted out of life and the types of projects and adventures and things that I thought would be super cool to like be incorporated into my work. Um, it seemed like they were all traveling, and I'd had other experiences where I got to travel a little bit, and my girlfriend at the time, I'd been backpacking and things like that, and it just seemed like more answers were potentially on the other side of traveling than not.
Mhm.
And I just sort of thought, okay, like let's do that. And like I said, my girlfriend at the time was up for a big adventure like that, so that certainly helped in terms of
Yeah.
instilling confidence. But yeah, it was like you said, it was still nerve wracking. There was still some fear and doubt on that side of it. Like this went on during the trip, but also before it was what if I take this big trip and I get home and then there's just no answers, right? And like that was a very real conversation I had with myself multiple times. And not that the trip was only about finding answers, but it was also like very clearly about that in some respect. And there was part of an element of that, like, I do want to try to see if I can build a portfolio while I'm traveling, or I do want to see if I can get better at photography and videography. And this will
Mhm.
give me an excuse to shoot every day or whatever it may be. So yeah, that there was the element of that. And then also, like I said, my girlfriend at the time, now wife, had done a 5-week backpacking trip while she was in college, which I had never seen anyone do my age. Like that was
Yeah,
something at the time. This is 2016, 2017 is when we started the trip in 2017. So like at the time, I had never really met anyone from my walk of life that just like
yeah.
up and left, right? And so it was a little scary, but like seeing, a couple people do that I knew, and then seeing more people online that were kind of making that work, I just sort of believed, okay, like at the very least, this seems like an amazing experience that I'll really benefit from. And, it seems like if worst case comes to it, like there's there's an ability for me to go get like a technical sales job. So like I can always fall back on that if I have to. So yeah, it's just like, let's see if we can make it work with not a lot of money, like you said.
That's crazy. 4,500, that's wild. Obviously, it's not
Yeah,
26.
I think I ended up spending less than that. I don't know the exact number, but it was yeah, it was it's pretty wild.
Well, you obviously visited, and I'll let you share obviously where you went, but it sounds like, from what we talked, Peru, like Hawaii, Japan, Indonesia, Singapore, London, even Italy, right? So there's a lot of places you went. How did that travel like reshape how you saw life and possibility as you were kind of going on that self journey?
Yeah, I mean, I think it reshaped everything for me, you know, uh, like, I was able to firsthand experience so many different ways of living life and witness so many different more opportunities and abilities to like set up your life in a way that's different than the one that I knew growing up. And for me, that was really informative, and it also really helped me understand what I prioritized most in life. Right, when you're backpacking, when you're on a very limited budget from a perspective, like, you have to make decisions about what you're prioritizing, and
Mhm.
you also start to understand and realize, like, what you're missing, right? Like, what elements of life back home do I wish we could have here, right? And those types of, like, experiences, whether you're aware of them in the time or whether you kind of realize them later on, they really helped kinda shaped everything for life, and, I'm super grateful for that, and, yeah, really, really, really valuable perspective that I wouldn't have been able to gain without
Sure.
doing
Yeah.
something like that. I think the other really nice thing for me was, I had the camera with me, I had a drone, and I was starting to build this portfolio, but I was also able to get a couple very, very small gigs while we were abroad, and so that also, from a perspective standpoint, and possibility standpoint, helped me realize what was available to me if I did apply myself in this arena, right? And those very small projects were really fun, and I
Mhm.
enjoyed them a lot. And so that really did start getting me thinking about like what my life could look like if I pursued this wholeheartedly.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's amazing. I think, yeah, traveling in general just, man, it opens you up to so much. I love that you said that, what you miss. When you said that, I'm like, man, I don't think many people realize, like, when you're in these different countries, right? All different, classes, if you will, of folks, you take for granted what you're missing at home in the States. So, yeah, that was really powerful, that you said that. And you kind of briefly kind of salted this in there, but obviously you used the trip for photography and, videography, right? You're kinda dabbling into it. When did it shift from, like, kinda hobby to potential career?
So the first time like that really became part of the conversation was when Shelby and I were in London,
Yeah.
and we were kind of finishing up the trip, but we weren't necessarily aware that we were finishing the trip. It was kind of an interesting spot to be in.
Right. Yeah, dynamic.
Just because, like, we basically our flight home for the end of the trip, we booked less than 48 hours for the flight. Like, it was just like a point of like where we sort of looked at each other. Shelby
Right.
was sick, right? And I was just like, "Oh, it's time to go home, isn't it?" She's like, "Yeah." I was like, "Cool, got it." Uh, which, like, the money was running out too, so, like, we knew that clock was ticking, but anyways, I had applied to be, like, an ambassador or something like that, for a different, uh, brand called Mati, and they wanted me to fill out this, like, profile for their website, right? Pretty standard, but part of it was, like, profession, like, what do you do? And I I mean, I must have spent, like, 3 days going back and forth about, like, can I put this? Like, am I able to put
Yeah.
adventure photographer and videographer? Like, am I
Right,
lying? Like,
yeah,
is
right,
that
my life.
like, this whole, like, imposter syndrome thing going on? Am I good enough to do that?
Right.
What of it? And, like, eventually it was like, "Dude, fuck"
Yeah.
actually, can I cuss or not? I don't
Yeah,
know.
you're good, you can cuss, yeah, you're
Alright, we
fine.
won't. Either way, we won't. Eventually, it was like, "Dude, just put it down, commit, and, like, bite the bullet, like, you're gonna do this, and if it doesn't work out, it doesn't work out, but there's no sense in, like, stopping yourself before you give this a chance." So that was, like, a couple weeks before we came home. I put this in there, and then, like I said, we very quickly afterwards, we realized, "Oh, like, we are going home." So once I got home, I now had this portfolio of, like, really solid like travel lifestyle content because Shelby and I were shooting each other the whole time, and we had a couple brands that we shot some things for, a couple events, some drone things mixed in there. And so when I got back to North Carolina, like some of that stuff stood out in a very good way, right? And so all of a sudden now it's like, okay, well, like now let's put this to the test. Now let's see if we can really make this work. And I was doing things like knocking on doors of businesses, seeing if they needed someone to shoot, or like, "Hey, I've got this shoot lined up. I can shoot in your gym." Like before I even had the shoot lined up type stuff, you know?
Yeah, you were hustling.
Yeah. And I didn't get like life changing money out of that. I didn't get like 5 clients coming to me immediately, like, absolutely, yes, let's do it. But I got like one at a time, and I got like one small gig here and there. And it was just enough to show me that like there is something here. And
Mm,
you're someone that can apply yourself, and you're someone that will do the work. So if you're willing to kind of just rough it for a bit, like, you can figure this thing out. And so for me, it was just kind of that combination of just getting just enough of a carrot from one person or one client or one brand when I got back to realize, okay, like, we at least have to go see if we can get the next one, and we have to
yeah.
go see if we can get the
Yep.
next one. And they just slowly got bigger and bigger, and it got to the point where, um, yeah, it was like, uh, it was just enough, right? And so, like, that period of time was really special for me. But yeah, the doubts were still there, but they were starting to get clearer and clearer on, like, what was possible. So yeah, it started during the trip, and then, quickly after getting home, sort of realized, like, "Okay, we're gonna at least commit to this for 4 or
Yeah.
5 months."
Yeah. And did that traveling, right? So like you're traveling to different countries, right? You and Shelby, you're probably having a great experience, right? Did that help shape how you communicate visually and tell stories while you were at that moment, or even now? I guess as you look kind of going forward, did it have some influence or impact on you?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think, in terms of, like, it shaping, like, creatively, like, travel was almost like an excuse for me to shoot every day, right?
Hmm.
Whether you actually need that or not is a whole different conversation. But at the
Right. Right.
time, that is a mental barrier of some capacity, and probably something that you can remind yourself of today as well. But, anyways, in that process of shooting so frequently because everything was new and everything was exciting and everything just felt different, it did start teaching me, again, whether I was aware of it or not at the time, but it teaching me that, like, okay, I can, like, look for creative inspiration any day in everything in life, right? And, like, yes, this particular scene is different than what I'm used to, but there's a version of this back home as well too. And so, yeah, it really did inform me from, like, a creative perspective of, like, okay, keep going, keep doing it. Like, you have the ability to find these moments. And I think once you kind of realize, as like a any sort of creative professional, but like a photographer or videographer especially, that you're able to start seeing some of those moments and those, like, opportunities, if you will. You start to look at it everything a little bit differently. And then on top of that too, like you said, like, you are traveling, you're seeing all these different walks of life, you're seeing and meeting some amazing human beings. And so
Yeah.
all of those perspectives sort of inform how you view life and how you choose to conduct yourself and carry yourself through it. So yeah, it was really, really helpful in terms of just shaping a few different aspects of my life in that way.
Yeah. Absolutely, man. I totally agree. And I know we're gonna get kind of on the back into your full circle moment, but at that point in time, do you think stepping outside your environment, or I would even say, do you think it's necessary to step outside your environment to discover who you really are? Or is that just kind of so happen for you, maybe specifically just kind of a part of the process?
Um, I think it's like I think if you really want to fully understand every aspect of who you are, I think it's
Yeah.
necessary in some capacity. I think that that can look like different things to different people. So for me, traveling was like an easy option. I think for a lot of people, traveling can be very informative, and there's that super cliche phrase. It's like travel is the one thing you spend money on that you know
Yeah, right.
that you get a return investment or whatever it is, right?
It's
But I think there's a lot of truth in that, because ultimately what it does is it puts you into it takes you out of your comfort zone, right?
yeah, for
Immediately,
sure.
wholeheartedly. Like, you can't it's very difficult to stay in your comfort zone 100% while you're traveling. But that doesn't mean that travel is the only option for that. And so I
Mhm.
think, like, you can do things like that are just completely foreign to your day, whether it looks like, practicing stand-up comedy, or like trying to learn a new language, or like
Mm,
even just spending more time alone with our thoughts. Like, I think that those are all different types of situations that can be uncomfortable for us. And I think the more that we are willing to kind of go into those moments and like kind of seek out that discomfort, the more we get comfortable being in those environments, and then the more we like have this space and awareness to like start reflecting on who we are. And yeah, so I think if you are someone that's trying to fully understand like every aspect of yourself, like that's what it takes. And I think travel is like a really, really great way to start and a really perfect option to kick it all off. But it doesn't necessarily mean you have to do it that way.
Yeah. Yeah, beautiful answer, man. Once again, I heard the word right, apply. Apply yourself to
Yeah,
this
yeah. Yeah,
and
it's a consistent theme for sure,
yeah,
but yeah,
and
I you'll definitely learn some things about yourself when you're staying in a $5 hostel in the middle of, like,
yeah.
Indonesia, like, you will see some stuff that tests you.
And just to like even like to your point, we're so used to the States. It's like when you get in a different country, man, you're a minority. Like you don't know their language, so you really have to like consistently go out to bat to like try to communicate or learn different things or whatever the case may be. But yeah, you really gotta step out and be okay with it.
Yeah, and in that vein too, it's like, depending on what country you're in and who you are and what your background is, like, you might be someone that is, uh minority in that country. You might be someone that doesn't speak the language. You might be someone that speaks the language, and you can actually connect with someone, and they're not used to that. And right, that's an
That's
incredible
huge.
experience
Yeah.
too. Like when we were in Peru for a month, I had a pickup soccer group that was like based in the small town we were in, and we were boys. Like they would come banging on our door because I spoke just enough Spanish to like really be able to like communicate, and then I was also like
Yeah.
just the gringo with long hair that could actually play.
Yeah.
And they
Sunshot.
would come banging on our door, be like, Roberto,
Yeah.
ven aquí, tenemos un
Yeah.
partido. And like we would
Okay.
go play games for money. Like it was a blast. But like those types of experiences, they just get magnified, right? When you're in a different environment. And so whatever it is, like it's just super special. And yeah, I can't recommend them enough.
Man, I love it. Yeah, that's another story, man, for another day. That's
Yeah,
awesome.
yeah,
So
yeah.
they were loving you.
Yeah, it was good. I was loving them too, though. It was fun.
You ever notice how sometimes you know exactly what you want to do, where you want to go, but something inside keeps pulling you back? It's not strategy, it's not effort, it's not even fear. It's the patterns running underneath everything. The beliefs you didn't choose, the loops you inherited, the internal static between who you are and who you're becoming. I created something for that. It's called the Coherence Diagnostic, a free assessment designed to show you exactly where those patterns are and what's possible when you shift them. Whether you're an athlete chasing flow or an entrepreneur building from vision, this diagnostic reveals the subconscious filters shaping your decisions, your confidence, your next move. It's free, it's deep, and it's in the show notes. Take it, see your patterns, and let's talk about what comes next. Because life is art in motion, and you deserve to create from coherence, not chaos. Before we get back in, if you are a brand, a creator, or an entrepreneur who needs high quality photo and video content, I want to introduce you to Robert Liberatore. He's a filmmaker and creative director who has been building visual stories for over a decade, and he is someone I trust personally. Check him out through the link in the show notes and use code LIFEISPOD10 to get 10% off your first project. That's good. That's good. Good experiences. So obviously you come home, right? You got all these skills, you got momentum, you got perspective, but now it sounds like you kind of put it to the real test. Like, how do I turn this passion into like reality or kind of survival, right? Uh, and it sounds like you slowly kind of built some freelance work as you came back home, and you were making anywhere from 2,000 to 2,500 per month at first. What were those kind of early days like emotionally, financially? As you come back and you're starting to kind of build this portfolio, as you kind of alluded to.
Well, like you said, I wasn't making a whole lot of money, and at first, it was more like 400 to $500 a month, right? And like, that was maybe month 1 or 2, and then month
Right.
3 you get to like 1,200, and then month 4 you get to 2,000, right? And the goal ultimately for me when I came home was if I can get to $4,000 a month, like I am doing it. Like I'm crushing it.
Mhm.
I'm making enough money to cover my overhead and my expenses with enough left over for taxes. And like
Yep.
at that point, I'll be like a true professional photographer. Right. And,
Baby.
it's funny looking back on that now, but I think it's also really valuable in terms of like reminding myself about it's like setting those incremental goals or like having those little incremental milestones can be such a huge benefit to yourself where it's like you don't have to be at the end road when you start, right? And we don't have to like have like the final vision immediately available to us. But if you can kind of pick it off and do little bits and pieces in terms of like allowing yourself to just continue to believe, like that's huge, you know, because there's obviously during that period, there's times where like you're like financially looking at it like, is this smart? Does this make
Yeah.
sense? Like, am I being stupid for not taking the easy job that's just sitting there, like sending me an offer, sending follow-up information like every week? And you know, I think at that point, it's like they're all valid concerns. They're all valid fears and doubts, right? Like our brains are wired to protect us and
Hmm.
help us survive.
For sure.
But you know, at the end of the day, it's like if you can sit there and consider the worst case scenario and really like exaggerate it, and it isn't terrible and it isn't that bad. Like for me, that gives me the comfort and the space to kind of reframe all those fears and doubts and say, well, I'm gonna keep pushing anyways. Cause right now I know this isn't as bad as it could be. Right. And it's not gonna get anywhere close to that. So let's just keep going. And I think that that was always the biggest tool in my toolbox to try to figure out how we can kind of overcome some of those fears and doubts because they were absolutely there, you know, and
Yeah.
I think rightfully so. But I think if you can find the ways to identify them, recognize that they are what they are, like they're fears and doubts, they're not reality, then you can kind of have the space and the self belief to keep going. And that was everything it took for me.
Yeah, that's a really good lesson, I think, for those who are listening to your points, like, put yourself in that position of what is the worst of worst, and what does that look like, and kind of play that out, and if it's not, catastrophic, right, where it's gonna disabilitate you, then, like you said, keep going, keep finding ways to, be creative and see the good. So, I like that, that kinda input that you had there. Were there moments, and I'm sure there was, but were there moments where, like you said, the job offers are coming in, was it tempted for you to, like, walk away from freelancing to say, like, "Well, I should probably just pack this thing up and let me get a job."
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I mean, so just to add a little more context,
Yeah,
I had received some job offers like coming out of college, but then I turned those down. But then like just to kind of continue to go through the motions while we're like planning for this trip, like I had a job interview the day before we left and I absolutely crushed it. And they offered me the job on the spot.
yeah, yeah,
And I was like, here's the thing. I've got this trip coming up. It's going to be at least 3 months, but like, I'll let you guys know when it's done. And they're like, cool, no problem. Like, job's waiting for you when you get back. I was like, okay, cool. So the whole time we're there, like, that's also looming over me. I'm like, am I figuring this out or should we just go back and do this? Right. And like,
right.
and so that obviously still was there when I got home and I tried to be discreet and sort of tell them as much as they needed to know. But, you know, at a certain point, you've got to decide if that's something that's worthwhile or not. So I was kind of thinking about that every day.
Mm. Oh, yeah,
and it, yeah. And so that was, you know, there was definitely times and moments where I was like tempted to, you know, just say, hey, you know what? Like, I don't have to figure out photography and videography right now. Like, I could take that job and then work on this on the side. Or
mhm,
I could, you know what? Like, this could be an amazing career. Like, let's just go all in on that. And I think all of those like possibilities and scenarios were viable and worth thinking about. But I think at the end of the day, the more I considered them, the more I just like understood and realized like for me at that given moment, like I needed to commit to this and what I was doing and tried to set it up in a way where I was doing it as, you know, responsibly or as measured as I could,
correct.
you know, but there were also moments too where like, you know, you lost, and this wasn't necessarily like week one or month two or anything like that, but still early on in the process for me where, you know, you had miscommunications with clients that eventually led to me
Mhm,
sort of eating certain costs or me losing a repeat client because I realized like, oh, this isn't going to help me down the road and everything like that. And yeah, at those times, like, you know, when you're hustling, you have an upsell of $600 onto a $1,000 project, like that's a lot of money.
oh,
And,
yeah,
you know, if you didn't fully communicate it to a client and you kind of realize, like, well, I've got to keep good faith, so I've got to be the one that just does this portion for
yeah,
free,
yep,
like that's a big hit. And you're like, well, how many times can I do that? Right. So things like that, I think were also testing and kind of tempting and kind of let more and more doubt creep back in. But yeah, I mean, they were all part of the process, and I think there's a really fun element of that that I still miss some days, and not to say that none of that stuff happens, but it's just sort of different.
Yeah, yeah,
different
the
scale
challenge.
these days. Yeah.
But when did you, fully kinda gain the confidence to go, like, full time? Because it sounds like, I think correct me if I'm wrong, I think you went full time in 2018, but what gave you maybe the confidence to go to fully commit? Was there kind of maybe, process that led up to that?
Yeah, so we just to kind of give context, that big like 4 or 5 month trip around the world happened the end of 2017 and went into 2018. So when we got back was early 2018, and that's when I started kind of tinkering around with this and seeing if we could make it work. And I think by about 5, 6 months in to that, so probably like mid 2018
Yeah,
was when I realized like, okay, like we're doing this. Like, and I think the biggest reason for me to be able to like fully commit to 20, like to photography and videography in 2018 was just like there just weren't other options that were lighting me up the same way this was. And I knew how miserable I was when I was in like a traditional 9 to 5 engineering role. And the other opportunities that were in front of me that were kind of more in that traditional realm, they just felt so similar to this. And like, it just, for me, it was one of those things where I think anything could have been in front of me that was a little bit alternative. And it just would have committed wholeheartedly, but it just sort of happened to be photography and videography, and that was the thing that was really giving me the most energy, the most passion, and, um, like, anytime I was shooting, anytime I was editing, anytime I was learning a new technique, I was just, like, so fired up about it that it just sort of felt obvious to me that, like, if the 2 options are left and left is, like, dark, abysmal, and miserable, and right is, like, super energetic, and maybe there's some unknown doubts and things like that, but at the end of the day, like, this is where it is, like,
yeah,
I'll at least give that one a wholehearted shot and see if we can make it work.
yep, awesome. If you were definitely, locked in to making that happen. So, obviously, as you're growing that business, right, the freelancing, it sounds like and you can give, once again, context to it, but it sounds like you were developing some pretty strong relationships early on through that work, just that natural process. What do you think, or what do you think clients actually hire creatives for, beyond just technical talent, when they're looking for jobs?
Yeah, I mean, so from yeah, I kinda say this all the time, like, with anyone that's, coming to me for advice in the photography world or, like, if I have a second on set that's, like, learning or anything like that, but it's like, talent will certainly get you in the door,
Yep.
but, like, who you are and how you conduct yourself is why a client will call you back, like, every day of the week? And I'm
Mhm.
someone that I I like to take the approach of, like, it's much easier for me to manage 4 quarters than 100 pennies. So I'd rather have 3 or 4 clients that I'm, like, really,
Locked
like,
in with,
all
right?
in on, like, kinda giving it my all, than trying to get the next client, the next client, the next client, the next client. And I think a big reason why I'm able to do that and why I fortunately have built a business that is, like, 100% word of mouth at this point is because when I get to set, like, there's no job that's below me or above me. Like,
Mhm.
there's no person on set that, like, I don't have the time of day for. And I think, if you can obviously there's a certain threshold for like you've got to have enough of the skill that's required to like to do the job, right? But once you're there, if you can do the job and you can do it in a way that makes everyone enjoy themselves and enjoy being around you and feel like we had a great day and um, feel like they love what they're working on, like, you'll get a call back, and that's what I think sometimes unfortunately gets lost, especially in this world, but especially in, like, the creative world, there can be some egos involved, and I think if you can kinda check those, leave them at the door, and just, like, commit to having a good time and working hard, like,
That's
that it'll come back around.
Yeah. Man, great answer, great answer. You actually kinda touched on another question I wanted to go back and ask, but speaking of creative work, right, how do you, I guess in your own words, what would you say, how important is humility in creative work?
I think for creative work, humility is incredibly important. I mean, I would say that's probably true of a lot of work,
Right.
but creative work especially, like, if you can commit to, like we said, applying yourself wholeheartedly, and then also being, like, brutally honest with yourself during that process, there's nothing you can't figure out from a creative perspective, you know? I think a lot of my success has come from, like, being bad at the things that I wanted to execute on, you know, and, like,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
being willing to, like, be bad, but being willing to put in the work to get better, you know, and, like, especially in those early days and still nowadays, you know, but especially early on, it's like I would shoot something, I'd go to edit it, and I'd be like, "Why doesn't this look like
How
this?" Or
you
"Why
Yeah.
doesn't this feel like the way I want it to feel," right? And I think if you can kind of reverse engineer what's wrong with something and, like, you know, wrong is subjective and it's not necessarily negative, right? And I
Mhm.
think that's where, you know, some people can trip up and fall, and I'm sure I kind of probably fall too far on the spectrum sometimes, and, like, it's good to recalibrate that, but if you can be honest with yourself about your work and understand, like, where the shortcomings are, you can always adjust, you can always reiterate, you can always go learn the new skill that can help you kind of enhance that for the next time. So if you're, you know, able to be humble and able to be like, express humility with yourself about your own work, that's how you improve, that's how you get better, and that's ultimately how you progress.
Man, yeah, so true, so true. As we transition, right, obviously, as we kinda bring, timeline, you're talking about 2018, 2019, we're gonna go into COVID, right, as life changed. One of my last questions as we transition here, man, is, what would you tell maybe creatives where I feel like we live in a day and age who want instant success, instead of steady momentum? Like, what would you tell those folks, yeah, today?
I think the concept of delayed gratification is something that's really important for a lot of people to understand, you know, creatives or not. But I think for me, the what I would tell like an early creative that's kind of looking for that instant success over like that long term momentum is that there's nothing wrong with instant success, and I think it's certainly something if it's in front of you, you can absolutely go chase it and kind of take advantage of that for what it is. But if you are viewing the creative world as like a realm and a career you wanna be involved in for the next 20, 40 years, they do have to at some point build something that has like longevity and lasting power, and the best way to do that is to kind of like build momentum and use it in your favor. So for me, I would say like don't be shy about the instant success, but like be able to recognize which one's which and ultimately make sure that you are working towards like that sustained long-term momentum because that's what allows you to really like make this viable, but also like build the space for you to be like truly creative, right? Because if you're kind of chasing the instant option every time, eventually like you sort of hit this wall where you don't get to prepare for the next progress. You don't get to level up and you don't get to like fully express your creative boundaries. And like that may not be important to you right away, and that's okay. But
Mhm.
ultimately it will be one day. And I think that that's how you kind of guarantee yourself a long career in this world is kind of like building on that and giving yourself the space to be able to fully express yourself creatively.
Yeah, yeah, and I'm thinking, even just stamina, you don't have that if you're going for the one quick hit, you don't ever develop your lungs per se, right, metaphorically in the field to do the long, kind of bigger projects, that are demanding. Um, as we transition, right, we're kinda diving into COVID, right? Life obviously changes. You're kinda, I would say, a novice in a sense, not really novice, but you're new, right? Within a year or two, COVID happens, right? Everyone's like, "Okay, what the hell now?" How did that reshape, the creative industry from, like, your perspective and from where you were at that point in time?
Yeah, so I was in an interesting position. I was still in North Carolina at the time when COVID hit, and I was also working like somewhat in-house for one of my clients as their creative director, but I was still freelancing fully during that and had the space and time to do it because it's sort of like a hybrid in-house role. Yeah, COVID was interesting because it really trimmed down like the sizes of crews for a lot of projects,
Mhm.
and I think that that kind of became an advantage for me because I was someone who sort of came from this like content creation world and this travel content world. And that meant working efficiently out of one backpack, right? Out of one camera bag. And for me, like being someone that was able to wear multiple hats and kind of do a lot of different jobs creatively at once, it allowed me to kind of get on some projects that maybe I would have gotten, maybe I wouldn't have gotten if it wasn't COVID, but all I
Yeah.
know is that I ended up getting a lot more of those projects during COVID when budgets were tighter, and that gave me the reps and, like, the momentum truthfully to, like, really kinda like, "Oh, we're going
Yeah.
all in on this," right?
Yeah.
And, I was also someone that was, like, comfortable traveling on a budget if I had to. I was someone that was comfortable, like, just still being who I was when I was out of my comfort zone, and
Mhm.
oddly enough, like with COVID too, some of the projects ended up just going international as opposed to like dealing with all the hoops and ladders of the US, So like I had a project in Mexico where we shot and like there were still regulations and guidelines and things like that. But it was like, well, if you're in this tropical place and you're not near anybody, it's a lot easier to shoot than if you're in like a set
Mhm.
in North Carolina where we have to COVID test every 2 days, right? So um there were things of that nature where it's just like you couple that with the fact that all of the content that brands had stored up, most of it was, like, irrelevant, as far as messaging goes, so a lot of brands actually needed more content during that period, and you have more people that are at home shopping and things like that. It was really like in some ways, this perfect storm that kind of, like, lend itself to, "Oh, well, you're someone that can do high volume batch shooting pretty well, like, great, we need that, and we need a lot of it, and we need someone that can do every job, and so I actually ended up getting a good bit of work during COVID, and I'm very fortunate, for that because I know a lot of people, um, had to really pivot hard during that period, and, luckily, it was just sort of perfect timing for me.
Yeah, it sounds like, man, like you said, it was a perfect storm.
Yeah.
We talked offline, you said you were operating kinda like 90-95% of traditional quality, pricing, right? Kinda nearly half the cost, and it sounds like, the traveling, the backpacking definitely did help on those instances. So you said kind of being lean, working out of a backpack helped you with some of those shoots that you got down the road. I wanted to kind of dive into because you said you worked in house. So for those who are listening, what did working, I guess, with a certain brand or maybe multiple brands, what did that teach you about freelancing, or what did that teach you that freelancing never could by working in house?
It's a great question. So I've worked in-house for 2 different brands over the years, and both of them were former clients that basically
So,
wanted to kinda take me off the market, and they
yep.
did so in different capacities, but both of those, like, situations, I think the biggest thing was really showed me how, like, the photos and videos and everything that we produce gets used and, like, where it all lives, and that taught me, like, a really important balance of, like, okay, there's the artistic side and there's the performance side of content, right? And both of
Mhm.
those things have to work in order for it to make sense for the brand. So it kind of taught me a lot about balancing that, which I think was super important. And then I think it also kind of gave me a perspective of what's possible with teams as opposed to solo shoots and like where and when those things do and don't fit and like kind of what the best time for some of those things are. Excuse me.
Yeah, you're fine.
Um, Yeah, I think also too, it really reminded me what is vital to the creative process and what's not. There's a lot of redundancy that goes on in corporate settings, and I think
Mhm.
that is very true for creative fields as well too. So for me, it was kind of just like this really eye-opening, just like shine a light on all things creative in terms of professional setting, like how the content's used, how it's produced, and ultimately like where the gaps and opportunities are to like do it better and do it more efficiently.
Yes. Speaking of like live, right? You said like where the product or the content lives. You speak about that, or you spoke about it prior, like living assets, right? Understanding where the content is or what the brand uses it for years. How did that insight, evaluate or help your creative strategy moving forward? Kind of had that insight.
I think it ultimately helped me like with going into shoots, just thinking about like, okay, yes, this might be a beautiful shot or this might be a really cool video, but are there just like little tweaks we can make in terms of optimizing this for the client as well too?
Mhm.
And those don't necessarily have to sacrifice the creative aspect of it, but they just might inform it or they might make us tweak something that's different, whether it's better or worse or the same. A good way to think about it is like if you take a photo of like a beautiful landscape or a skyline Like, is there a way for me to just sort of slightly shift it so that now there's like some negative space in the frame that would allow a brand to put copy over it, some text that now they can use this in
Yeah.
5 different ways instead of just like the one, right? And so I think little things like that just kind of help you do it. And I think that that also just reinforces the importance of like pre-production and planning like out a shoot, because if you can kind of think about some of those possibilities and those opportunities before you go into the project, like it all becomes a lot easier. So I think it also helped me just get better and better at like the initial strategy.
Yeah. Okay. Man, it sounds like you give us a little insight. Okay. Give us a little example there of what you could do.
Yeah.
Okay. We'll take it from 1 to 5. I'm like, okay, that's good insight. All right. People are listening. They can take that.
Yeah, we're
Uh,
trying, we're trying.
how important is it as we move forward here? How important is it for creatives to understand, the business and the distribution, right? Not just the art and understand that concept. But I think before you answer that, I think a lot of this resembles to sports or like artists. They once they get into it, they're like, oh, there's more. There's a business behind this. It's not just my voice or my athletics or what have you. It's like there's another component to it.
I think it ultimately depends on like what arenas someone lives in, but at the end of the day, like, we're all selling something. Like what we could be selling is just why an employer should continue to employ us, right? But
Correct.
I don't think there's like any amount of business knowledge that someone can have or learn that becomes detrimental to them. So I think like the more informed, especially for creatives, because that's something that isn't like at the forefront of like a film degree or like a photography class or whatever. But the more informed creatives are in terms of the business side of things and the distribution, obviously
Hmm.
just the more tools they have at their disposal and ultimately like the better equipped they are to kind of deliver what a client needs and also just like set their business up in a way that like built to succeed and has that lasting longevity to it.
Yeah. No, that's true. Help them, just maximize the business, understand how to position themselves, and and essentially too, I would say maybe not get taken advantage of, but also understand the dynamics of
Yeah.
the ebbs and flows. So I want to transition, right? We're kind of getting to the back half here, before we wrap up here. But in the beginning, you kind of talked about right when you traveled to Peru and all these other different countries. You dabbled in some of these documentaries, and you actually did some awesome work out there. Um, and you stepped into like documentary filmmaking recently, right? So what pulled you kind of toward long term storytelling, which may be different from what you were doing, which was short term or different applications?
So I think long form storytelling was like always part of the plan. I
Hmm.
love documentaries, especially kind of that phase of self discovery we talked about, like end of college, right afterwards as well.
Yeah.
Like a lot of what I was doing was sort of watching documentaries, trying to figure out what paths were out there and what cool things I could just go try. And one of my idols to this day is a guy named Jimmy Chin. He's kind of best known for filming Free Solo, but he also has done some pretty rad things in the mountains, and he's an absolute legend. Look him up. He's skied down Everest multiple times. He's just a tank. But he had made this film, I believe in 2016, called Meru that I had watched, and it's about like 3 guys, including himself, that go up this really like a difficult plunging mountain. Yeah, it's a fantastic watch, but I think I watched it like 4 or 5 times, like in like a
Right.
3-month span, just like showing it to friends and all this stuff. And I was like, ultimately, one day it'd be amazing to make
Something like,
like films like that. Like that
yeah.
seems like such a cool way to live your life, to be the guy that's just like running around with super cool adventures, just documenting everything. But then like that thing that we talked about so many times about self belief and doubts just sort of you know was there as well, right? And like, oh,
And
well,
yeah.
am I a good enough climber to do something like that? Am I someone that can figure out how to make this all work and all of that, right? And I think documentaries were on the back burner early on, just because like there's so many skills as a videographer, a DP, a photographer that like you obviously have to know to do storytelling well, right? And I
Right.
think I'm
Right.
someone that like I am a bit of a perfectionist. I am my own worst critic, and
Yeah.
I think there's a lot of advantages of that. There's definitely some disadvantages, but the the important part of that is like, if I'm going to do something, I want to be able to do it as well as I can, or as well as I think is like acceptable. And I think early on, documentaries were just out of the question because they just felt like such big projects. But I think the more and more I continue down this career path and the more creative skills I continue to develop, like I started to realize like, okay, some of these things are possible. And I'm also someone that, still to this day, like I think I'm more creative than I used to be. I think I'm someone that,
Mhm.
you know, I I now view myself more creatively than I used to do as well. But at the end of the day, like I'm not someone that I think has like the gift of like a creative eye or someone that
Yeah,
just like
yeah.
naturally is like putting out these beautiful works of art. And I think that's okay. But I think what's really cool about documentaries and like longer form storytelling is that though like you can sort of use like the bits and pieces of each thing to sort of build this formula that at the end spits out this really creative, beautiful piece of work. And so I think that's something that has drawn me into them like over the past couple of years. It's like kind of understanding like, okay, these tools that I have, like if I combine them in certain ways to tell these magnificent stories, now that's like a really creative piece of work that ultimately like I'm proud to share. Right. And so I think that that's the other aspect of it too, is like you talk about what does success look like. I think it starts with, finding an arena where you can wholeheartedly and passionately apply yourself. But I think like the cherry on the cake for that is like if you can be really proud of that work and like have something that you can be excited to show
Brag
like your
on.
friends
Yeah.
and family and stuff, like that's exciting for me. And so I think we're kind of entering that phase, and I'm really excited to see where it goes. But yeah, we're in the documentary world nowadays, which is cool.
I love it, man. I mean, I love documentaries personally. So for those who are listening, man, I love them. I love the storytelling. I love the narrative. Um, either on Apple TV, right? Those who go in the jungles and the Amazon and they're in there, right? I could see you right in a little canoe, right in the water. So it's like I love that stuff. I eat it up. So it's dope that you're doing that now and journeying into that avenue. You spoke of Peru in the beginning of the podcast, right? You filmed a documentary there. We're going to tap into it now. Obviously, the same place where you kind of started off in your creative expansion and journey. What did that full circle moment feel like? And feel free to also you can talk about the documentary that you're doing.
Yeah. So just to again, add a little context. So I mentioned we talked about that 4.5 month trip around the world, but it started with a month in Peru. And
Mhm.
so that really meant like, um, at the time when I went down there, I was comfortable with photography, but I wasn't like, an amazing photographer or anything.
Yeah.
Um, I hadn't done much with video yet, but I knew that videography was something that I wanted to do more of. And so when this trip started, like the whole goal for me shooting wise was to also do like these recap videos everywhere I went. And so Peru is really like the first place where I gave myself full permission to shoot video like all out, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So to then come back like 7 years later on a project that I'm getting paid to be down there for to film like a documentary, which is the type of project I wanted to work on my whole life and stuff like that. It's just really like one of those moments where again, like you're aware of like the how special the period of time that you're in is.
Yeah.
And I don't think you get those opportunities in life too often. So I was really fortunate and like feel so grateful to like to be aware of that while it was going on. It was also really fun because so my friend is a really talented like Peruvian chef. He has a
Mm.
restaurant in New York. Good friend of mine. His wife went to school with my wife, so we just like know them well. And so it was also cool to just like kind of see him in his element because he was sort of like the Anthony Bourdain of this documentary about ceviche and all the different regions of
Yeah.
Peru.
Yeah.
It was like really fun project,
That's awesome.
but it was also cool too because like I was the only non-Peruvian on the project, right? So like we're in this
I
wild
bet.
environment, right? And you talked about how we kind of get comfortable with some of these things and um it's still in many ways like a project where I was really out of my comfort zone, right? Because it's first
Yeah.
time working on a documentary. I'm with a crew that only speaks Spanish primarily. Like a lot of them spoke quite a bit of English, but like I was having to use a lot of Spanish on set to like really like make it all work, and it was great. And it was like an amazing crew and had a blast, and like still talk to some of those guys. So it was just super fun to like, in many ways being like coming back like, oh, now I have all these skills. I have like this established business. I got clients, all this, but at the same time, just like still being way in over my head. So it was really fun in that regard. But yeah, the documentary is called Ceviche. Is I actually just talked to the Rodrigo, and it sounds like it's going to premiere in Peru in September, which is really
Mm,
cool. So I might
okay,
try to get
awesome.
down there for that.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
it's a feature length, so yeah, it's cool. We go to 3 different regions of Peru and just explore um, what ceviche means to those different areas, and how different chefs and restaurateurs are approaching it in those different walks of life. And it's a really cool project. It was really fun. And yeah, you talk about riding in a canoe. I was hanging off the edge of a ATV on a beach, leaning over, holding
Yeah.
my camera, filming some stuff. So it was fun, man. It was really cool. But yeah, it was just a nice reminder as well, too, that like even when it feels like we have things figured out, we still don't have things figured out because you go back in there as a seasoned vet, but also as a complete rookie as well, too. So it was a blast though.
Man, I love that, man. I love that for you because that's something to be proud of. Honestly, man, as a friend and who knows you, outside of your mets, that's something to, clap about, be proud of. Like you said, be proud of your work that, hey man, I'm doing it. And it was something that you were immersed in and learned so much, I think, just from just the experience beyond just filming. It was just the culture. Um so you also worked on a women's mountain, also working, excuse me, on a women's mountain climbing documentary in Mexico. Um, you know, what excites you about telling stories about human resilience?
Man. I mean, I think this probably comes as no
I know, no
surprise.
surprise. Yeah, this is a
Yeah,
great question.
because like I said, I'm someone that likes to empty the tank. I like to see what I'm made of. I like to go all out. So you talk about resilience and like showcasing those stories. I think it's really cool to just celebrate people that are doing incredible things and like putting in these massive efforts and pushing themselves to this point that it becomes abundantly clear that there's so much that life has to offer us, right? And like if you
Mhm.
can capture that and showcase that and um help inspire other people to like push themselves and whatever that means for them. I think that's really powerful and it's really rewarding. I think it's also at the end of the day like a really fun challenge because if you're keeping up with a story that like really is heavily centered on resilience and like physical effort, you got to be able to keep up with the people that are doing it, right? And so like I think trying to document these really badass women that were doing a first ascent of a route down in Mexico.
Yeah.
Like, that for me was one of the closest things to, like, playing a college soccer game that I've experienced in a while where it's like, "Okay, like, time to lock in, let's make it happen, like, let's see what we got," right? And I think that was a blast as well too, being able to kinda combine those 2 things.
Yeah. Yeah. Hell yeah, man. I love it. And kind of a quick question: has, I guess, storytelling, documentary kind of style, has that been challenging in different ways than just like your commercial, normal work?
Absolutely. I mean, there's so many different elements of it that are, like, kinda posing different challenges. I actually had a call with the brand that's sponsoring the documentary and today and our team as well and kind of going through different feedback and things like that and so like longer storytelling like you get different types of feedback than you do like a commercial project, right? And like that's great.
Yeah.
It's not necessarily good, bad, or
Right.
indifferent, but it's just a different process. So I think ultimately that's like a fun challenge. I think also too when you're doing like more commercial, usually there's a bit more of a brief involved, right? Where you kind of have an idea of what you're trying to capture or what you're trying to create. And I think obviously with documentaries, you have an idea of that going into it, but you also understand that there's only so many variables you can control. And that depends on the type of documentary or type of story you're trying to tell. But at the end of the day, you are going to have to problem solve a little bit differently. And, with a project of that length, like anything that changes will affect it differently, right? And so you're gonna have more opportunities for changes like that to happen and ultimately those compound over time. So I think it's also interesting with these longer projects, just seeing how they morph and evolve over time compared to like something that's more of like a 10, 15, 20. 60-second video, like it's a different game, but
Yeah.
it's fun.
Yeah, for sure. So obviously, man, you've blended rock climbing, which for those who have been listening, Rob definitely does some rock climbing in his day. Obviously, rock climbing, travel, and storytelling into your work. Do you think creativity becomes strongest when it overlaps with your personal passion, such as rock climbing and travel?
Yeah, I mean, I think it kind of depends a little bit, like I love the challenge of every shoot. I love the creative problem solving for any shoot. But at the end of the day, like one of my biggest clients is women's footwear, right? And like
Mhm.
we have a lot of fun on those shoots and like they really challenge me and stimulate me in a way that a lot of other like documentary projects never will, right? And like the creative process for those is super fun. But I think anytime you can combine like your personal passions with like your work, it's always a blast, right? Like you get to lean into it a bit more and like from a creative perspective, you are able to anticipate things a little bit differently. You kind of have like a gut intuition about what's coming. So you might be able to kind of plan a creative shot a little bit better, whatever it may be. I think at the end of the day, like I said, I'm always looking for the types of projects where I can like passionately pour myself into them wholeheartedly. And like an 18-hour day is a lot of work, but it's also a lot of fun, right? And I think naturally when you're in an environment where you're filming and documenting or photographing like the things that you like to do in your free time, for me, like those naturally just end up being more fun.
Yeah. Yep, absolutely, man. It's a good mix. Definitely a good mix. And do you see too, Rob, like do you see your I guess documentary kind of being like your own lane moving forward? Is that kind of like I guess your legacy
Yeah, I
documentary?
mean, I think it's a good question. I'd say maybe, maybe not. I hope so. Like I'm having a lot
Mhm.
of fun with it right now. But I historically have been someone that is sort of averse to, like, setting and relying on goals. I know that's not, like, the norm in society these days, and I think
Yeah.
there's definitely some drawbacks of that. But I am a big believer that, I like having the space for the projects to come to me, if that makes sense as well too, and that goes for photography and videography, but that also goes for life in general as well too. So I like it very well could be, but I'm not someone that's gonna take the time to overanalyze stress or anything like that about whether or not it will. I'm just gonna kind of put one foot in front of the other, do the work and see what comes of it because my buddy Taya, who we mentioned earlier in the process or in the interview, he mentioned he always has this phrase that he likes to lean on. It's like one thing leads to another, so do the one thing well, right?
Mm.
And
Yeah, that's
I
good.
think it's a really powerful thing, and I think for me, like, I've always taken the mindset of let's give this my all, right? Like, let's try this out, and so far, it's allowed some really unique projects and experiences to come into my life, and some of those I would be okay if they didn't happen, but a lot of them, like, I would never trade them for the world, right? And I think that if I'm only focused on whether or not documentaries will become my legacy, then there's other projects and other experiences that I might miss out on. So I just try to kind of focus on doing the good work and seeing what comes from there.
Man, yeah, that's absolutely right. Yeah, always keep the options open, keep the horizons expanded. Well, like I said, as we come to a close here, man, you spent your career following curiosity and allowing your work really to evolve naturally, which is a beautiful process from engineering to travel to filmmaking and obviously now storytelling with documentaries. As you look ahead, what creative or life directions feel most alive for you, currently or right now?
It's a good question. It may come as no surprise, but I'm someone that has my hands in a lot of different pots.
Mhm.
So documentary storytelling right now is a blast for me. I really enjoyed my like commercial clients and like that creative workflow as well too. Like it's a really exciting period, but it's also been really fun to see my wife sort of step into her own as like a really inspiring, like knowledgeable,
Yeah.
badass like yogi, right? And she is
Mhm.
really carving out this really cool lane in her life of like kind of being this kinesiology and anatomically based like yoga like go-to person, and so anything I can do to kind of magnify that for her and who she's becoming in that world and like the retreats and the trainings that she's leading, like, is really fun for me. And then also sort of working on some side projects as well in the background that are uh, pretty exciting, that they're, uh, I'd say content media adjacent. But yeah, it's a fun space to be in. And then on top of that, just sort of leaning into more and more of these like endurance challenges that sort of light me up. Like I do a 24-hour rock climbing competition every year. I'm
Mm.
about to do this long endurance race as well too. And so those are fun for me. And I think kind of doing more and more of that and seeing how I can kind of blend work with those types of adventures and side quests
Yeah, yeah.
are fun for me right now.
Oh, yeah, yep. No, I love it. Yeah, and you've been exploring too. You talked about, um, exploring other opportunities with, specifically with hemp, as you spoke offline, and really more of the supplement space. Um, if you're open to sharing, kind of what sparked that curiosity, about that world and how that kind of came about.
Um, yeah. So for me, kind of like looking into the hemp world, I think, you can probably relate to this, but as a collegiate athlete, especially, there was a lot of like demonization around,
Mhm.
different
Yeah.
cannabis and like hemp products and things like that. And I think a lot of that just comes from not fully understanding them and not having the research there. But I think, you know, 10 years removed from all of that, like a lot of the research has come a pretty long way. And just starting to like kind of see and understand how those types of products can actually be used as tools, whether it's a performance standpoint, whether it's a creative standpoint, and, just slowly experiment with some of those things and realizing like the types of experiences that I was having with them were actually like better and better than I expected them to be, and kind of quite the opposite of what the
Was being
stories that
told.
I'd been
Yeah.
told throughout the years were, and realizing how they affected my work and how they affected my personal life, and how all of those things were sort of significantly better than the alternative options, really kind of sparked this curiosity for me to kind of look into it more and more and start doing more research on what was possible with them.
Yeah. No, I agree. I think, connotation's always been kind of negative, when it comes to that, and obviously athletes, it's you're told obviously stay away from it, and, in any capacity. So, I appreciate you sharing that because I think, it's unique to obviously dive into that field of what you're doing, kind of blending, wellness, well-being, and just creative work also within in the cannabis field and hemp specifically. Um, Last couple questions here for you, Rob. You've embraced uncertainty, obviously, throughout your whole career. Um, how has your relationship with uncertainty changed over time as you looked at your process?
I think that my relationship with uncertainty has evolved into sort of understanding that like the uncertainty is okay, right? And I
Yeah.
think being comfortable with that is something that I've like kind of had to evolve into as well too, because as I mentioned, like I was someone that was really motivated in athletics, but also in terms of like academics. And I think in that vein, I loved always having the answer, right? Always trying to find out what the right answer was, or you know, studying the technique for math that like allowed me to kind of come to that. And I think that that's great, but I think that doesn't really leave a lot of room for uncertainty, as a high schooler or college student or whatever it may be. And I think the more and more I've gone through life, and especially sort of been willing to commit to some of these like uncertain phases of my life as well too, I've started to understand and realize like uncertainty isn't always a bad thing, and
That's true.
uncertainty isn't always like a death sentence. You know what I mean? In terms of like figuring
Mhm.
something out. And so I think now, like as I've gone through this career and gone through different phases of life, um, now when I encounter uncertainty, I am more willing to like sit with it. I'm more willing for it to just play out and more willing to just continue to move forward with it, even when I don't have the answer, because I know that there are only so many paths that can diverge from it. And so I think the biggest thing that's changed is just sort of like an appreciation and an understanding for the fact that like I can continue to move through uncertainty, and that's okay.
Yeah, I think the last one's most important, right? Moving through uncertainty, chaos, just not stable ground, if you will, and being okay to walk through all of that. So that's a lesson in itself. That could be a whole word you could talk about
Yeah, yeah.
later on.
Yeah, I mean, especially in the creative world, like, there's I'm sure most work is like this, but, you know, it ebbs and flows, right? And it comes in waves, and I think for early on in my career, like if I didn't have a shoot lined up or I didn't have a client booked or anything like that, like, there's a lot of doubt that comes into it with that.
Mhm.
And I think, nowadays, like just to give an example, it's like, okay, I know that it's going to be a waves. I know that the phone will ring. And so instead of like stressing during that period of doubt or like allowing those doubts to kind of control my next decisions when they come in, like recognizing them and then also recognizing that they only have so much validity to them and like being patient in that allows me to kind of put my energy elsewhere instead of like stressing about what the solution is or how I can fix it and XYZ.
Yeah, no, I agree. Last question here for you, man, is obviously through all your experience, what you've done, right? Engineering, global travel, freelancing, right? What version are yourself? What version of yourself? Got my son in the background here.
Now you
What
good?
version of yourself are you most proud of becoming?
Yeah, that's another tough one. I think I'd probably have two answers for this. So I think one version I'm really proud of is like who I had to become in order to sort of take that first leap, right? Because as you
Uh-huh.
mentioned, that was a period that had a lot of fear, had a lot of doubt involved with it. And for me, you know, I think it would have been very easy for me to not go on that trip, to not pursue photography, videography, and to just play it safe and take the job and move on, right?
Yeah, yeah,
And there wouldn't have been anything wrong with that, but I'm really, really happy and really, really feel blessed for like the opportunities and the experiences I've gotten to, have in my life because I was willing to sort of like step into that uncertainty and kind of commit to that phase, even though I was terrified during the time.
and
So
yeah,
that's
try.
definitely one. But truthfully, like I'm really proud of like this phase of life too. I feel like I'm in this um, self-awareness phase of like kind of how significant some of the projects I'm working on right now are and sort of like how they may or may not kind of help affect the rest of my life and unfold. And yeah, I'm really excited about that. And it sort of feels like this period of evolution and growth. And I don't think we get to be aware of some of those too often in life. So for me, this is like a really fun period too, because I'm like, I'm in the trenches doing a lot, which is fun, but I'm also aware of like how significant some of that might be. And that's not always the case. So yeah, this whole phase of evolution right now is like pretty exciting as well.
Right on, man. I got my son here, so I apologize on the
No, you good. What's up,
tangent.
man?
But
That's what
my,
it's all about.
my last question for you, right? I was asked
Yeah,
all
yeah.
right. The last question is, man, like the podcast is called Life Is, right? And if you were right now in the season of your life, if you kind of fill in that blank, right? Life is blank. What would you fill that in with?
Life is evolving.
Hmm. I love that, man. It is. It always is. It always is evolving, and it's always um, diverging, right? Moving, growing, and it's never stagnant. It's never stagnant. So that's a good way to end the podcast and move forward. Yeah, life is always evolving. My last thing here, I'm going to give you time, right? In the last 30 seconds here. Where can the guests, the listeners, find you? Any social media projects to stay connected with you?
Yeah. So I have Instagram. That's kind of like my main channel for everything.
Yep.
It's at Robert_lib because my last name is a lot especially in North Carolina. So at LIB or underscore LIB. And then also have a couple projects I'm involved in as well too. If you want to learn more about climbing, you can listen to a podcast that I work on. My buddy called the Ground Up Podcast. It's at Listen to Ground Up on Instagram. And then as you mentioned, Koi, I'm working on a project in the background that is hemp and cannabis related. Um, project that's going to hopefully help people celebrate
Oh, yeah.
movement and lives and rediscover that. So that is still in the works, but you can find that on Instagram right now at enjoy lazy days. is the tag on Instagram for that. But if you go to my Instagram page, you'll find everything. That's the best way to do it. It's at Robert_Lib.
All right, man. Well, I love it, man. I appreciate it. And I'll make sure to put those in the show notes. So for the guest, you'll be able to find that and get connected with you, stay connected with you as well as you move through your journey and your season of life. But more than happy, man. I'm grateful to have you on the show, and I appreciate your time, your wisdom, and just to share your expertise with those who are listening. So thank you.
I appreciate the time from you as well, Coy, and thank you for having me on, man. This was a blast. This was fun, and this was also therapeutic in some ways too. So I'm excited, and hopefully listeners enjoy it.
Awesome. Well, hey, man, take care, Rob, and I appreciate it.
All right, see you.
What Robert showed us today is that self-awareness is not a soft skill. It is the most structural decision you'll ever make. He knew in an engineering program at 20-something years old that the path he was on was not his. And instead of staying because it was working, he left because it was not true. Everything that came after, the travel, the career, the documentaries, the full circle return to Peru, all of it was downstream of that one act of internal honesty. That is not a career story. That is a coherent story. And that is exactly what this show is about. I'll see you in the next episode. That's a wrap on today's episode of the Life Is podcast. If something in this conversation landed for you, a shift in perspective, a reminder, or something you needed to hear, don't let it stay there. Take it with you, put it to work. If you're ready to go deeper, I have tools built specifically for this journey, a self-discovery blueprint and a diagnostic designed to show you exactly where your foundation needs attention. Links are in the show notes. And if this episode added value, share it with someone who's building, leave a review, help us grow this community of intentional people doing real work. Remember, fulfillment isn't found, it's built. Life is art in motion, and you are the artist. Until next time, keep building.